You're now ready to collect some data for the tape timer. So you should have a Ziploc bag that has a strip of paper in it. It's got some dots on it. So we should have that. That's our data strip right there. And then we need to have our measuring tape. So I'm just going to take the measuring tape out. We want to make sure that we're measuring on our centimeters side. Okay. And we need to find the start part of this. So you can see that this was the tape that was attached to the car, and we're going to try to get that information to make a position versus time graph, a velocity versus time graph, and an acceleration time graph. And so there's my start part. And what I'm going to do is we're going to combine, and instead of measuring the distance between each dot, we're going to measure the distance between every 10 dots. So I'm going to just take a pen or a pencil, and I'm going to count. So this is my start dots. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. And then we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And we're going to do this all the way through our entire strip here. When you get to the end and you have no extra dots, you're done. So that's your strip. Now we're going to go through and we're going to measure the distance between these. Okay? And so I'm going to use my tape measure, but I'm not going to go from the 0 mark. It's just too hard to go with that little metal clip. So I'm going to go off of the 10 centimeter mark. So I'm going to kind of lay this down here. So let's find the 10 centimeter mark. Okay? And then I'm going to measure out here. And so now we got to remember that this is just going to be 6. And then I read 6.1. Let's see. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, so that's the 16. So we're going to go 15.56780. So 5.80 centimeters. Now I'm going to write this right on the strip so I can remember that that was the distance between here to there was 5.80 centimeters. And we do want to make sure we kept that 0 there because we should have 2 places after the decimal. And now we're just going to do this for the entire strip. Make sure that you don't misdo what I just did. Let's go back here and check this one because I think I messed up. This is the one downside of trying to make sure you're measuring. So that was 16 and this would have been 15. There we go. .1. Now, once we've got all of our strip of paper marked up with our measurements on our dots, we're now ready to move on to the spreadsheet. Alright, now we're going to take our strip of paper and we're going to enter our numbers in. So right here where it says distance intervals, and this is the way the spreadsheet should look for you when you first open it, you're going to go ahead and type in the value there that you measured. So like my first one was 5.80. Now do not put the centimeters on it. We just want the number. Okay? And we'll make sure that that 0 will show up because I'm just going to do this. There's these little marks right here that says increase the decimal place. I want to make sure that I show 2 decimal places after. So I'm just going to do that. And then I'm going to enter in each of my numbers that I took off of my strip of paper. And so this is going to take a little bit of time, so you can go ahead and work while I'm working. We've got all of our distance intervals in here. We're now going to do time intervals. And the time interval is the time that it took to make those 10 dots. Now, the way that that tape timer worked is 1 dot every 1/60th of a second. So really, our intervals are going to be every 1/6 of a second. So I'm just going to do 1 divided by 6, and that's going to give me that interval. Now, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take that, and I'm going to just make, oops, hold on. I want to do, equals 1 divided by 6. So that it's not, oh, we need to make sure that that's not a pause. Alright, my format was wrong on that, so I went up here to format, down to number, and then I just switched this to number so that it actually shows me that that would be 0.17 seconds. Now we're going to do this for each of these, so I'm just going to drag this down, and it's just going to make sure that I match the size. So I make sure that I have 0.17 for each of these intervals because that's the time it took in between each of those distances. Now that we've got our intervals put together, we're going to set up and do some formula work. So I'm going to go slow on this so that you can do this and follow along. So you might have to pause it as you go. But to get our time, we're going to press equals. That's going to start our formula. We're going to take the cell right above it, that's D2, and then we're going to add, so put a little plus sign in there, and we're going to add in the 0.17, so that's the B2. Now when we hit enter, that's going to take that time that was above and it's just going to add that interval. We're now going to grab the little blue square and we're going to drag it down to the 1 point here so that it adds that interval to each one. So really the strip of paper took about 2.17 seconds to go through. We're going to do a similar thing for the position. So again, it starts with an equal sign. We're going to click on our position above, which was 0, and then we're going to add that interval. So that's that 5.80, and when we hit enter, it'll add that. Now look at it, it's already asking for an autofill. We're going to go ahead and check yes on that. Oh, no, we don't want that. Okay, and we're going to now go ahead and pull this down so that we actually get the whole strip. So in other words, that long strip of paper was almost 1.5 meters long. And so you can see that our distances are getting bigger as we're going. We're now ready to create a graph. Okay, so I'm going to walk through the how to create a graph. So the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to highlight all of these 2 columns, and then I'm going to go to insert. Oh, hold on. There's insert a chart, and it's going to try to think about doing it for us, and it does look like it did a pretty good job on creating one for us as a scatter chart. So we see it as a scatter chart. Time is on the x-axis and position is on the y-axis, and so that's exactly the way we want that one to be. And we already have labels time and position with units, and this is our time versus position. And the only thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add in here for the green pickup truck. Okay, so that we know that that's the car that we're looking at, and everybody was using the same green pickup truck. Now I'm going to show one more thing here. That's where I'm going to go to these three dots, and I'm going to move it to its own sheet. Okay, down here where it says chart 1, we're going to rename this to be the PT graph. So this is our position versus time graph. Okay, and you've now completed the first graph. We're now going to work on our second graph. Now the second graph is the velocity, and the velocity graph or the velocity information is based off of that slope. So it's the change in our position over a change in time. So again, we're going to start with an equal sign. We're going to do the parentheses, that change in position, so that's E3 minus E2. So that's a change. That's like the rise over, now this is going to be our run piece. So again, a parentheses, our D3 minus D2. So it's like a Y2 minus Y1 over X2 minus X1. It's that slope equation. And I'll pause it there so you can make sure you see it. You're going to go ahead and then hit enter. And then what we're going to do is we're going to grab that little blue square and we're going to drag it down so that we get all of that information as well. Now we can build that next graph. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to build our next graph. And for this one, I'm going to highlight all three. We'll take one of those out of here in a second. But we're going to go to our insert chart. And we want, now this one didn't give us that scatter chart. So we're going to go back under the chart type, choose scatter. And we've got our time as the x-axis. And now we've got position and velocity. So we're going to get rid of that position data. So we're going to go to the three dots and then remove that. So now we have our data here. The only thing it didn't do was it didn't give us our title and our label for the axes. So under customize, we're going to go to our chart title, and this is going to be the velocity versus time for the green pick up. Oops. Okay, and then we need to label our axes. Now under the chart title, there's going to be the horizontal axis title, which is going to be time measured in seconds, and vertical axis is going to be our velocity measured in centimeters per second. And then we should have our axes labeled. We have our title all good. Now we're ready to be done with this, and we can go ahead and move to its own sheet. And then change that title to be the VT graph. And now we can move on to our last column, which is our acceleration. Okay? And so under the acceleration, we don't have a 0 because the acceleration happens right away when we let go of the car. So, but it is still a slope equation. So we're going to start with an equal sign. And this time it's going to be the change in your velocity. So we need a parentheses. Our F3 minus our F2, close that parentheses, over another set of parentheses, and again, this is our time issue, so it's minus our time, and that'll give us an acceleration. Now again, we're going to grab this and we're going to drag it down, but that last one we don't need, so we're just going to delete that last one, and that's where we'll get our accelerations. So now we can go ahead and we're going to graph this. Again, I'm going to go through, and this time I'm going to highlight all of them except for that last one. So we want to make sure that we keep our data set looking good, and do an insert chart, and then we are going to go through and hit the scatter, and then we need to go through and delete that position one and delete that velocity one. So now we have just the acceleration information. We now need to go through and put in our chart titles. That's again under our customize. So chart title, I'm going to go to my chart title first. So this is going to be our acceleration versus time for the green pickup truck. And then we need to label our axes. So the horizontal one was time still. Remember the units. And then we do the vertical axis, and this is going to be our acceleration. Now this one's in centimeters per second, or centimeters per second squared. And now that we've got that, we can go ahead and check our labels, label, title. We're done with that. We can then go move it to its own sheet and then rename that sheet to be the AT graph. Now that you have your three graphs, you have your PT graph, you have your VT graph, and you have your AT graph, and your data, you're now set and ready to answer the questions in the form. All right, we're going to give you a little bit of help here as you kind of go through and do the questions on the form. Let's start with the PT graph. So when we look at the PT graph, again, the slope of the line is going to give us what the average velocity would be. So if we want the average velocity, we're going to kind of estimate what the slope of this line would be. So really it's like using this point and maybe the middle point and then the end points, so that you can kind of see that it looks like it curves a little above and a little below. But if we kind of use those 3 points, so either the 0, 0, and like this one and this one, if we tried to find the slope between that would give us what we'd expect our average velocity to be. So determine an average velocity by estimating the slope. Now I do see that we have curves here, so that center point kind of says that we're shifting our curve, and that means that we have two different accelerations. One curving up, that's showing that we're speeding up, and one curving down that shows that we're slowing down. When we go to the VT graph, you're going to see two kind of lines here. So one that's a line that goes kind of this direction, and then one that slopes back the other way. Now that's if you have a car that actually produced two different accelerations. The first thing that we wanted to do was find our maximum speed. So our maximum speed is that peak on this graph, because that's the highest that we would be. So it looks like we're just under 100 centimeters per second for my graph. You'll have to check that for yours. We then want to make sure we give an estimate of this slope, and that slope is going to tell us what the acceleration was. So we should have an estimate of this slope. Again, it's a rise over the run. So if you use this point here and the 0, 0 point, you'd probably get a pretty good estimate of that slope. Now, if we estimated the other slope, that would be our deceleration side. So we could look at that deceleration as well. When we get to the VT graph, okay, the AT graph, we're looking for flat areas, because when we experience constant acceleration, there's going to be zero slope. So our constant acceleration happened right through here, and if we wanted to estimate that, we would go back here to this axis, and it looks like we're just a little under 50 centimeters per second squared as our positive acceleration. So right around that 50-ish mark, and then all of a sudden we dip below. And so this is where we have some negative acceleration, and again we'd be looking for a flat line to kind of see it. And it looked like it slowed down faster than it was speeding up. Hopefully that helps you answer the questions that are in the form.